Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about Devotion, the movie Devotion.
Oh yeah.
This movie, it's most people haven't even heard of it, Captain. It's interesting because I didn't even know what it was. Somebody said, "Hey, you want to go? Our friends, you want to go see Devotion with us?" And we're like, "What's Devotion?" So I'm looking it up, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, it's a movie about two pilots from the Korean War, the Forgotten War." Yeah. And interestingly enough, I've personally never forgotten about the Korean War, but at the same time, I was not really that educated, with it. I mean, it's like everywhere there's World War II history, there's World War I history, there's Vietnam. There's just not a lot about the Korean War out there. And so
not a lot at all.
I can see why they call it the Forgotten War, which is really sad. But going into the movie, we thought, let's go see what this is all about. I didn't want to know anything about it. Went in. Wow. So I'm going to say this much. Incredible. Very emotional.
Good.
Very emotional, by the way. So if you're someone who gets impacted by emotional stuff, story-wise,
bring some tissues.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, it's an intense and kind of a sad story, and I mean, it's a true story. So it's based on a true story. Beautifully done, though. I thought it was told beautifully well, powerful, inspirational, and also a good message right now that I think we need to hear. It was very, there was a lot of positivity and an uplifting aspect to it, even though there's some sadness to it. But it's the kind of friendships and, it's called Devotion for a reason. So that's the kind of messages and models, like role models, that we need right now. And so highly recommend it for that reason. The soundtrack was excellent. The acting was excellent. The casting was great. And then I looked it up because I afterwards went, okay, how true is this story? And I know that, movies are going to take liberties, and it's inspired by a true story and versus based on a true story. So I know that there's more liberties taken by the inspired side. But interestingly enough, the more that I read, it was very true to what happened. So yes, there were liberties taken, as I mentioned. There were a few things changed. Like, okay, for example, and this is not a spoiler, but there's a helicopter pilot in there. There's he's a real person, and the character was based on this real person. Well, interestingly enough, in real life, he did not become a helicopter pilot until after the events of what happened in the movie. The events of what happened in the movie inspired him to want to become a helicopter pilot, but he was a flight instructor who knew Jesse Brown.
Okay.
So
and the main character was Jesse Brown, right?
Yeah. And so
it wasn't just someone who was inspired by Jesse Brown?
No, this was Jesse Brown.
Okay.
And so Jesse Brown and this helicopter pilot were actually real friends in real life, as they were in the movie. It's just that the only difference, so it's like the truth was the same. It's just the time was shifted is all,
Okay.
So, I mean, little
like
liberties like that, which I consider to be like, that's no big deal because you didn't really change the truth too much. So you didn't take away from the reality or the essence of the story, which I appreciate. And again, I don't want to share any more to give away any spoilers. If you don't know about the story and you want to go see the movie and be surprised, then I don't want to share any more. But I really was impressed at how close to the real story they kept it. So my biggest thing I want to say is bravo to the filmmakers. This movie is very well done, and Hollywood should be making more of these types of movies, and this is how they should be doing it instead of changing the truth of stuff. Yes, there was one issue that I had with it, just one, and it was a modernized take on, the story that happened. It was very much a 2022 perspective versus a 1950 perspective.
That's what I was worried about, but now you've made me want to see it more.
Yeah, just one thing though, and that was the one thing that bothered me because it's like that just didn't
apply.
Well, maybe it did, but it was so, as you like to put it, gratuitously 2022 and not 1950. But beyond that, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with what they said or how it was done. It's just clearly it was out of the context of the 1950 era is what bothered me about it. But other than that, I mean, highly recommend it. And even if you don't see it in the theater, I really would ask that you watch this movie because I think it's a must-see for everybody. I really do. I think the message is great and the story is incredible. So go see it.
That's really cool. I just want to mention, I read a cool article about the main character, Jesse Brown.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I read it, just recently. And I can't summarize the article, but just letting you know, the guy in real life was a total superhero.
Yeah.
He was an amazing person.
He really was.
It's like, is this all true? It's like, you can't believe how much this guy overcame in his life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was really inspiring. That article made me want to see the movie, and now I want to see it even more. So, yeah.
Interestingly enough, you're right about that. They showed, of course, you know, keep in mind this is a snippet too. You know, the movie is just over 2 hours long. You can't tell the story fully in real time because it's just so much more than what the 2 hours can handle. And so they do talk about, he shares some of the stuff he had to overcome. And it didn't even scratch the surface on what you read and some of the stuff I read. It's like there was probably 3 or 4 times the amount of stuff that he had to endure, and that, you know, call it abuse,
Right.
physical, emotional, mental abuse that he endured
and overcame.
And he overcame it. And he overcame it in an incredible way. And they really showed that in the movie too, about how his response was, I don't know how he did it. It was amazing. The friend of his, the other main character, was also a superhero in ways too. Especially at that time, especially in 1952. And so it's just, it's totally worth it, man.
And I want to say also, anybody who's interested in reading about the Korean War, if you've read a lot about World War II like I have, and the Civil War and World War I and Vietnam, I've read tons of books about all those things.
Yeah.
But the Korean War was actually a really interesting conflict, with a lot of interesting characters like the prima donna MacArthur and just the way the front lines shifted. You get a little bit of that watching like MASH. You kind of get a basic impression of it, but just reading about how that conflict played out is fascinating, and it was really impactful to the people involved in it, which is why it's so weird that it's such a, relatively forgotten part of 20th century history. It's kind of strange because it's a fascinating thing to read about. So
it is. Yeah. I'll say one more thing too, is that, you know, watch the movie first if you don't already know the story, and then go and read more about the story too. Because I think it's great to watch the movie, but then it's great to dig deeper and find out more about it. And, you know, like there is a scene towards the end of the movie, and you'll know what I'm talking about, but it was very condensed in the movie. And so it felt rushed to me. And so when I read about how long it actually took in real life, I was like, okay, that makes more sense.
Okay.
You know, it was a 45-minute period, not a 1.5 minute period that they showed in the movie, for example. And on. Like it was more, but it's a great way to kind of dig into the story. But it's one of those that I'm so almost surprised how engrossed I am with the story that I just want to keep reading more and more about it. That, you know, what's funny is we talk about this with movies. Movies used to impact me on that level. I used to get to the point where I was like, I have to go read more about this. I have to dig deeper into this, just because it was so impactful. And lately, I just haven't had that, but this movie did that for me. So, and especially as a history buff, you might really enjoy that too. But we'll see.
I know. I can't wait to see it. I would see it this weekend, but I'm doing other stuff. So yeah,
I understand.